What happened in qualifying?
Show got P4! Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the P1 podcast with Matt and Thomas. We are here, Italian Grand Prix post-quali, and you might be feeling some good energy. Now, before we dive into qualifying, there was, of course, some news that was the worst kept secret in the world. And that was, of course, Kimi Antonelli being confirmed at Mercedes. Not the best timing, obviously, because he did spear into the wall in FP1. And, of course, they had to kind of, just put out a few little fires around that. But, yes, Kimi Antonelli now finally confirmed for next year alongside George Russell. I think we've already sort of spoken about how excited we are to see that because we all thought it was going to happen. Now that Mercedes have committed to him, again, it's like another storyline next year that I can't wait to watch. And there are so many across the grid because there's been so many moves that I am personally really interested to see how they stack up. Obviously, the big one being Hamilton versus Leclerc, but how does Antonelli get on against George Russell? Does he very quickly get on the pace? And then he is lauded this next kid that might dominate and all this sort of stuff. I mean, Nico Rosberg was being very complimentary about him, even though he hasn't had one race yet in Formula One.
Yeah, it's set up so nicely, the fact that we've got this amazing pecking order now where it seems incredibly close. And just to throw a bit more spice into the mix, Mercedes are putting a rookie, a very young rookie, into what could be one of the best cars on the grid if Mercedes continue their development. Incredibly exciting. I saw something absolutely amazing, actually, that a lot of the journalists were writing up, and something that Toto said, that even from those 1.5 laps he did before he put it in the wall, in the data, his bravery through the corners were unbelievable. And he actually went 11 kilometers an hour minimum speed faster than Max through the whole session, who was fastest. And basically the reason he spun was because the tyres couldn't handle the entry speed that he was going through the corner. So
it is funny how they've tried to extract 1.5 laps of flying and gone, God, he's quick. But the main reason he was that quick is because no one else wanted to destroy their tyres as quickly as he did. Anyway, very exciting. He was
going for pole in an FP1 session, wasn't he?
He certainly was, and I like to see that.
I'm here for it.
I certainly do. Okay, let's get into Q1 then and begin with Tsunoda, Stroll, Colapinto, Bottas and Zhou with the bottom 5 in the first session of qualifying. There was a little moment, which I don't know if we've had a decision on just yet, Tommy, with regards to Oscar Piastri and Max Verstappen in the pit lane, which was actually pretty close, where Piastri was let out and almost squeezed Max into the wall, who was already on pit exit. But I don't imagine that'll be anything other than a fine because it's qualifying. If had it happened in the race, not that anyone comes out of their actual garage, but if it was a pit stop, then of course it'd be a slam dunk. But qualifying, they're a little bit more lenient because it's not the same, is it?
It's not the same, and people can avoid it and things. So it's always been fines. It makes sense. I don't think a driver should have a 3-place grid penalty because at the end of the day, the team is deciding to let them out as well. And I know there is this talk of like driver error, but in that situation, it is literally like that they are just meant to be feeding out kind of in a slow, orderly fashion. So I think that's why they're a bit more lenient, and that has always been the way, basically.
Other points to obviously talk about, first and foremost, Colapinto. That was look, he sent it. That's the way I would probably describe Franco Colapinto. Of course, made a mistake on his final run in Q1, so he didn't manage to get out. And I will just quickly say I did predict him 18th. But yes, Colapinto, I think, did a decent job. He's not off the back like Zhou. He's very much 18th and in the mix and looked reasonably quick in comparison to Albon. Of course, Albon's all the way up in 9th, but Alexander Albon is a experienced
veteran
Formula One driver.
Now,
Whereas Colapinto's just getting up to speed, and I think it was more than enough on his first showing in qualifying, from my perspective.
Yeah, definitely he's done a good job. Shame about the mistake, because I think he definitely could have got through. You look at the gap, it was quite close. Where he was on his first run, Although that being said, you wonder, even if he'd made it round, I can't remember who was in the order, if this was before or after the little whoopsie from Kevin Magnussen to just go in the gravel at the end, and whether he would have been caught out by that, which was a very, very bizarre moment. Nothing will come of it. And I don't want to go down the conspiracy theories route, but it was very weird to see someone go off after they'd already made a mistake and were backing off, when he essentially, of course, was through.
Other things, was a question from Ticey_46. Since when do unsafe releases in quali amount to a fine and not a grid penalty? 2 unsafe releases today and nothing will happen seems a bit weird. Of course, that was reflecting what we did say about Piastri and Verstappen, and there was also, I believe, Sainz and Verstappen had a very similar incident a little bit later on. But as we explained, qualifying is very different to it shouldn't be a grid penalty in my opinion, because you've got all of these teams trying to come out at exactly the optimum point. This is going to happen. Of course, there's a slap on the wrist, there's a fine, whatever it might be, but if we start throwing out grid penalties, it will take away from qualifying a little bit, because that's the excitement of them all sort of barreling out, and yeah, teams might make small mistakes and they should be, as I say, warned for that. But grid penalties, that would be wild for me. Yeah,
definitely shouldn't be grid penalties for small incidents like that. Could have been a lot worse, and like we said previously, if he had gone into the side of him and damaged his car, then there's something to be considered. But just because a driver has a close moment in the pits and has to hit the brakes, it doesn't this is the thing, and why I'd argue that in the race it matters, because it's actively affecting your time in the pits when you're doing a Grand Prix, whereas in qualifying you're just coming out the pits, like you're not timed at that point, so it makes absolutely no difference to you at all.
You can argue there's like minor advantages of being further in the queue or shoving your way in, but it's night and day, right, between actual race time and slotting yourself into a queue, and I think the FIA do a good job in monitoring that the way that they do. I think we also need to touch upon, of course, Yuki Tsunoda, your GOAT, out even with the upgrades, and Danny Rick just pipping him in Q1. What are your initial thoughts on that one, Tommy?
Initial thoughts are that Daniel Ricciardo actually did a great job into Q2 as well, which we'll get into. But RB are looking woeful after the points that they scored at the start of the season, and had another kind of moment from Yuki where the team kind of, I think they're a bit more conscious of it now, aren't they? And they keep telling him to kind of calm down on the radio, and there's no point sort of damaging your reputation any further, or kind of losing your mind over a 16th, because unfortunately that RB are around that kind of pattern.
Let's go to Q2. Alonso, Ricciardo, Magnussen, Gasly and Ocon were the 5 drivers out in this session. I think Alonso came over the radio, said this is about as much as I could do, which is typical Fernando Alonso, hyping himself up to be the greatest qualifying delivery of anybody there.
Of course.
Yeah, I mean, Lance down in 17th. So, it's as more like we expect in the Alonso versus Stroll rivalry, with Alonso a lot further ahead. Of course, we've mentioned Ricciardo, who did a great job, P12. He also said, I think he got extracted everything out of the car. So I think he can be quite happy with that, because it puts him in the mix with the likes of Albon, Hülkenberg, Alonso, which I can already see in my mind's eye an Albon train that goes all the way back to probably Ocon or Tsunoda. So I'm looking forward to seeing how that one unfolds in the race.
Yeah, so true. The big stars from Q2 were now Aston Martin have fallen off even more and look like there are some tracks where it does look like they can jump into that Formula A bracket, even if it is 9th and 10th. But now it does give an opportunity for drivers to pip them into that Q3. And Albon and Hülkenberg did a great job. With Albon starting 9th, let's hope for his sake and Williams' sake and all Albon fans that this is not a repeat of Zandvoort and he gets disqualified and has to start at the back. I'm sure it won't be. And if he does start the race, boy, are we in for a DRS train.
Well, of course he's going to start the race, mate. You didn't put him as biggest good surprise, so he's absolutely
true.
fine, mate. He's in the clear. Obviously, both Alpines looking very mid, it has to be said, in 14th and 15th. They weren't troubling getting into Q3 at all. And of course, Magnussen right in the middle there as well, with his cheeky, whatever they were, things in Q1. He starts 13th. And that pretty much sums up Q2, I think. So let's go to Q3, where the top 10 were Norris, Piastri, Russell, Leclerc, Sainz, Hamilton, Verstappen, Perez, Albon, Hulkenberg, and yes, you are hearing that correctly, a McLaren 1-2 and Max Verstappen in 7th place. Huge takeaways from this, of course, is how out of position Max is, and that Lando Norris, his closest championship rival, is literally on pole position. This is what I'm sure Red Bull feared, is not just McLaren getting quick, but the likes of Mercedes and Ferrari getting in there as well. And that's exactly what we've got here. Monza is not easy to overtake, so it's not going to be a slam dunk. Max Verstappen comes through the field and finishes third. I will say, because everyone's thinking Red Bull downfall, Red Bull this, Red Bull that it was also maybe just a really scruffy Q3 for Max.
They're just struggling to understand the car at the moment. And for them to do a 19.6 and then be way off that. I think the most surprising thing is the fact that Red Bull are so far off. It's just over a tenth between the top 6, so everyone else. And then they're not even within half a second. They're 7 tenths. Max almost.
So can we now say that Red Bull are in Formula B?
Maybe.
I mean, they're literally closer to Formula B than they are Formula A in this qualifying
which is
session.
insane. What I would say, is it's a very unique track. They're clearly not working around here, but there is no denying they have fallen off big time. And to hear Max Verstappen, who at the start of the season were like, "Oh, the car's absolutely on rails," and this car's unbelievable. How have Red Bull managed to completely change the philosophy on their car and make an even better one? And he's going to win 24 races in the year, and let's pack up and start a tennis podcast. To Max Verstappen basically going, you fix one problem with the car, and then something else goes wrong.
First question on this Q3 segment comes in from P1 Patreon member Sophie. With the pace of the McLaren and Lando and Max struggling so much, will Andrea have to make the hard choice to prioritise Lando before it's too late? Look, listen up, McLaren. I know you will absolutely not listen to this because I'm literally just a Formula One fan. You gotta put your eggs in Lando's basket now. It's championship on. None of this. It's too early in the season. Oscar Piastri needs to be wrapped up in cotton wool. We can't possibly. You're 70 points behind. There is potentially a 15-plus point swing if everything goes right at Monza. It's game on. We've got 8 races after Monza left. McLaren can win both of these championships, in my opinion. Red Bull are falling off, as we've said. They don't know what they're doing with the car. Max is constantly unhappy. And look at this. McLaren works around every circuit.
Yeah, they absolutely have to. They can't afford to end up in another Hungary situation where they're messing about and feel too bad, because we know that Oscar Piastri is super aggressive at the start of races. We know that Lando's had incredibly poor form at the start of races, but can deliver in the race and brilliantly won last time. So you look at that order, and Lando needs to be leading. It's got to the point now where it's as extreme as if Oscar even takes him into turn 1, they need to be letting him go in the first lap, because there's a huge opportunity. So if Oscar and the 2 Mercs and the 2 Ferraris, who are all, deliver a lot of the time, can slot into that gap as well, it's not just a 7-point advantage that Lando's going to be taking off Max. It's going to be 15-20 points each race. I
wouldn't say each race. I will say that Ferrari absolutely have whipped out Monza spec, and they're probably going to slot straight back into behind Red Bull after this. But there is still more points up for grabs than a 1-2.
But say that it's not absolutely far fetched to think that Lando, if he wins the next couple of races, and Max is only managing fourth or fifth, 4 or 5 races time, the gap could be
gone.
It's gone.
Anyway. Speaking of McLaren, we've got another question, and Tommy, you've chosen another one from the same person. That's impressive. Ticey46. Oscar P1 into turn 1. I think that it's very possible that Oscar could lead into turn 1. McLaren would be silly, and I'm sure they would be wise to the fact that you don't want to be starting jostling and lifting and letting Lando through if he gets a poor start going down towards turn 1. Oscar has to drive his own race in those first maybe couple of laps. If he leads the race, he leads the race, and then McLaren sort it out. But it's when they leave it too long, and perhaps Oscar is a little bit slower than Lando in the race, and then there starts to be a bit more of a holding up of Lando, and then other drivers are getting in. That's when the problem starts to arise.
Yeah, it's a long run down to turn 1. It's also a very sketchy first corner where they go incredibly slow from high speed. So it's going to... Oscar could very much lead. It happened at Hungary where he got the better start, drove past Lando. Could see it happening again, but even if he does, McLaren have to make the tough call and just get back Lando, and then the good thing for McLaren is the fact that Oscar is ahead of Max Verstappen. Unless Oscar has the worst start of all time, he should in theory be ahead of Max Verstappen, and he should definitely be finishing ahead of Max Verstappen in the race, and that is what they need for the rest of the season.
Okay, next question comes in from Patrick, I think that is. Do you think it's a coincidence that the RB20 has got worse since Adrian Newey announced he was leaving? I do think it's a coincidence, and I've noticed it. It's insane that the minute he's been sidelined, Red Bull have got worse and worse. Now, I don't think that Adrian Newey is building the car. He's not the one putting the parts on. So, realistically, it must just be a coincidence. But it doesn't exactly bode well moving forward for Red Bull if they've lost the genius behind what these cars were into the coming seasons. So, I think, Tommy, you sort of nudged a little bit about Max Verstappen when we talked about the Mercedes thing. Is this when Max's phone starts ringing a little bit?
Yeah, it is. I agree that I think it is a massive coincidence that it's happened. Of course, Newey left and Max's form was still pretty good, but now he's, of course, on that run where it's getting worse and worse. And what I've not heard anyone really speak about with the fact that the Red Bull has kind of going backwards is there's all this talk of the budget cap in Formula One and the wind tunnel time. And of course, Red Bull winning the championship meant they got less wind tunnel time. And their breach of the cost cap penalised them even more with wind tunnel time.
It's a very good point. It's hard to nail down, I guess, which factor is affecting them the most, because, of course, you throw in the turmoil at Red Bull in general, everybody leaving. But yeah, also the wind tunnel time. Are they even that bothered to lose the constructors right now? Could they just be like, Ferrari, you come through as well, and we'll get third, and then we have even more wind tunnel time than if we were to finish second or first? Are they that bothered? I'm not
Maybe
sure.
That's the Perez master plan all along.
Final question from Box and Stop. Do you think Max is regretting turning Toto down now? No. I think Max Verstappen, it comes back to not everything is so knee-jerk that one qualifying session at Monza and he's going, damn, that Mercedes looks well good. Oh, the Ferrari looks quite good now. He's still leading the championship by 70 points. We are witnessing what looks like a reasonably big downfall in terms of their performance. But no, I don't think he's regretting it at all. I think he'll just be dialed in to try and just secure as many points as possible and get himself another Drivers' World Championship.
I don't think he's regretting it now. We have to remember that Max finished second in the last race behind and beat the Mercs. The Mercs were 50 seconds off the pace. Of course, they've come here. Red Bull looking like car again, but it's a very different circuit. I think the most interesting thing, even at the end of this race, if it stays in the same order, we'll of course be having the same conversations of, oh my God, the championship is on. But when we get to the likes of Singapore and stuff, if then Red Bull are finishing 7th and 8th, we go, oh, yes.
Well, that was their bogey track,
that was
Singapore last year. So I would fully expect the same to happen. But we are looking into the future and getting very excited for a potential title battle going into the last race, or Lando Norris just dominates and seals it 2-3 races before the end of the season, and we're like, oh, for God's sake, McLaren dominance. We'll see you tomorrow. We'll be live on Twitch, Matt P1 Tommy, if you haven't followed us already, and we will see you very soon tomorrow for the race. Lots of love. Bye.
Goodbye.
We didn't even speak about Ferrari. Wait, why are we saying bye? Charles Leclerc finished 4th. Carlos
there
finished 5th.
There were literally no questions about it.
Yeah, I know. I'm just waving. No, it's fine. I'm just waving. This is the outro.